welcome to the weekly dose with OG Flexer. Today we have one of the special guests on the show. I'm not going to spill the bean. I'm going to give her a chance so that she can introduce herself to us. So today, who do we have on the show?
Uh, Greetings everyone, I'm Nondabula, a lecturer and a PhD, recently PhD graduates at the University of the Western Cape.
That's so wonderful. I'm sure you had a PhD holder in UWC. So me personally, I believe that that's a story that we need to hear. That's an inspiration to us as students and also as people that are willing to know you as a person. So we want to dive into your personality and your inspirations. Take us through your journey. Who are you? Who's Nikki?
Well, how can I start? Okay, so I grew up in a small town called Bloemfontein, Free State. I moved to Cape Town in 2002, where I matriculated at Para High School. And then I started my journey as a education student in the senior phase and the FET phase in 2013. And I did my BA degree for 4 years, and then immediately I went into my honours degree in 2017. After I did my honours, I did my master's for 2 years as well. And then I think in 2020 when COVID hit, that's when I took a bit of a break. And then in 2021, I started my PhD in language education. And yeah, I recently completed my PhD in 2024.
Yeah. So from hearing your background, from where you are, you were coming from and everything, I don't remember hearing you saying you had maybe a gap year or something like that. So how was it like to be like a student full time, from matriculating and then go to university, getting your degree, honors, masters and PhD? How was that journey?
I'm a very passion-driven person. I like to be stimulated by books. I'm very curious. So I thought if ever I had to take a break, the mind would be very stagnant and, I had a purpose, I had a drive, and after I completed my degree in 2016, it was very difficult to find a job. So I was like, you know what, instead of just sitting at home, let me just complete my degree, do another degree, and study further, because I had a love for education. I loved what I was doing, even though education wasn't really my first choice after matric. It was IT, but then I thought to myself, okay, maybe there's a purpose of why I'm here and why I'm a teacher. And then immediately when I completed my honors, I was like, what's the use of just having an honors degree in education? Study further. And then masters, I got accepted for my masters here at UWC as well. And then, it was just passion, and drive and dedication and, that love for education as well, especially language education. How do we teach language and the love of language as a whole. So then, that's what inspired me to keep pushing. And now that I'm not studying anymore, I feel so empty because it's like, okay, what do I do now? It was just something just to keep the mind stimulated, just to develop myself in the field of education as well, and to also make a difference in the lives of teachers who will be teaching the future generations as well. So
so like you mentioned that education wasn't your first option, right? Your first option was IT. So now you have dived into education, right? So what was your upbringing and motivation since you are now, let's say you took that path to now you're saying, I'm now diving into education. What was your upbringing and motivation in that journey?
Upbringing in terms of?
On terms of you now being, okay, since now I'm not going to take IT, now I'm going to education. This is what I'm going to focus on. So what I'm asking is that what was your upbringing on that journey?
I really enjoyed it, and I think I went to one of the universities that really pay attention, to teacher education. And, in my first day I was like, okay, this is quite interesting. And the thing about, even if I didn't get to do my first choice, which was IT, I can actually use my IT skills, in my teaching and learning, or in my teaching as well, or use my skills that, I developed in high school as someone who was very passionate about IT. So I really did enjoy the journey. I can't say that, I'm sitting here with regret that why did I do education. I don't regret anything. It was really enjoyable. Everything that I learned has been very valuable, especially, in growing myself as a person, understanding people, developing emotional intelligence, and, getting to understand the relationship between people, even if it's just outside the classroom context, understanding how people think and what they need, So education is extremely important, and I got to understand that throughout my journey as an undergrad and postgrad student in education.
Oh, okay. So, hearing your story, I must say, so, since you have your PhD degree, and I'm much very sure that you're still in your 30s, right? So, I think there's a lot of sacrifices that you had encountered along the way. So, take us through those sacrifices. For example, you say friends that you had, and then since you, you say that, let's say you have friends, and then since now you have different careers, or the way you see things is now different, you have to take different path. So, how did you deal with such sacrifices and encounter through your journey?
It was very, very challenging, and I'm going to speak mostly on my PhD journey. I was motivated by my family to start this journey as well. So I had great support from them, so that was really great. But in terms of friends, I did lose a lot of friends. So I think in everything in this life, everything bears consequences, whether it be good or bad consequences. I think people hear the word consequence and think it's a bad thing. So I knew that there's a lot to be sacrificed here. I sacrificed sleep, which is still affecting me now because I don't sleep. I'm awake. I think you see as well when I'm chatting, I'm awake at 3 a.m. So there was a lot of sacrifices, and I lost a lot of friends along the way, people that didn't understand why I need to do this, But I also appreciate the people that stuck by my side, that understood that Nikwe is doing this with a purpose, People that would call me, people would check up on me, even when I wasn't well and all of that. So, I mean, you sacrifice sleep. I wasn't sleeping. I would get back from work at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, let's say, in the evening. I would bath, take a 2-hour nap, start working from 9 until 6, get up from work again, and come to work. Cycle continues, And so a lot of times it was very lonely. And I say it was very lonely because, friends would want to do something and you'll feel like, you know what, I'm pushing something here. I have a deadline to push. I can't go anyway. So, but you do get those people that understand and that will stick by your side. But you definitely, either or, whether you start the journey, whether you don't start the journey, you will lose friends along the way. So you just have to appreciate the people that stick by your side. So, yes, there are friends that I lost along the way. There are friends that they didn't understand. So sacrifice sleep as well, sacrifice my social life. And it was a very big adjustment when I completed my PhD in November, or submitted my PhD. I just didn't know what to do with myself. Like, I had no motivation to go out because I was so used to being inside the house, like 24/7. Just go to church, come back, go to work, come back, So that was a very big sacrifice for me. But I'm happy, I'm content. It's not something I feel very morose over. I don't feel depressed over the fact that I didn't have a social life. I'm sitting here grateful that actually I'm so glad. Now I get to live my life. If I want to go out, I go out, knowing that I have this on my shoulder now, and no one can take it away from me.
Yeah, that's a big accomplishment, I must say. So did you ever have let me say, mental shutdown, since you're saying you never had sleep and it's something?
I do. I'm suffering from it now. It was like I said in December, it was a very severe depression that I went through because my mind was so used to doing something. I always had something to do. And now in December, I wasn't going to work because, it was vac. I also wasn't doing anything. So it's almost as if the mind was overstimulated. And it's like, now what do I do now with my life, So I still have that mental shutdown. My sleeping patterns are still affected. I sleep mostly during the day, but at night I can't sleep. So yeah, that mental shutdown. But I'm slowly becoming better, which is great. But yeah, it wasn't easy. After I completed, it really wasn't easy. But I'm glad that I'm starting to get and feel myself again and become myself again, even though the journey is still ongoing.
The journey is still going?
I mean, I mean, once you finish your PhD, you don't stop
Yeah.
there. You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
you. There's always something to do, especially in academia. You
Yeah.
always have to develop yourself, and learning is lifelong. You know, you
Yeah,
as
yeah,
teachers
yeah.
as well. It's a lifelong journey. You know, so even if you are working in corporate, you are still developing yourself. Whether you're working as a lawyer or doctor, you still have to study. There are new things to be known. So I'm very mindful of that. That you know, I still have to develop myself and learn new things. Go out there, you know, and develop my voice and agency.
Oh, okay. So right now, okay. Yeah, so currently I want us to talk about literature.
Mm.
Since you are now a PhD holder on literature,
Mm.
I want us to talk on how do you think literature is on an educational system here in South Africa?
Okay.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
importance of literature
Yeah,
in
the
South
importance
African
of
schools.
literature.
You know, I think it depends on which context you start talking about literature, because literature is very broad.
Yeah, yeah.
But let me talk about it from the perspective of, you know, everyday literature. We are exposed to literature every day. I mean, even the movies that we watch is a form of literature. So when we speak about literature, especially in schools, it's very important to develop the learner's voice and agency. I mean, even though sometimes learners don't see the importance, but if ever a child did not grow up with a culture of reading and writing, or did not grow up with literature books, you know, in the environment, it can become a bit difficult for them to develop a love for reading when they are in school. So, you know, that drive to have literature, to have poetry, to have novels, to have literature plays in the classroom, you know, it creates a platform for learners to become self-aware, because when they are reading, they learn new things. They learn new things about themselves, because sometimes they identify themselves within, you know, whatever they are reading. They see themselves as the characters in certain plays or certain novels or certain poetry books. Sometimes it also reflects their lived experiences. Sometimes they have no way or manner of understanding or expressing themselves, because they are not aware of what is going around them. And a form of literature in schools can help them, you know, identify themselves, understand the world they live in, and also, you know, develop, you know, that critical thinking skills that are needed, you know, to interact with people coming from different cultures, and, you know, they have different belief systems as well. So I really do emphasize the importance of literature, even if it's not as a form of assessment, but also just to develop any other skills. You know, we speak about, let's say, mathematics. We don't see it played in our everyday lives, but it does help us with problem-solving skills, you know, developing problem-solving skills. So in the same breath as well, literature can have that form, can, you know, take on that form of developing our critical thinking skills, developing our cultural literacy skills, and, you know, developing self-awareness as well.
So do you think learners that I can say they don't come from backgrounds where they're supported when it comes to literature? For example, this learner is attending a school, but at school they do learn about literature, but when they get back home, they don't get exposed to books, poetry, and such. Do you think that might affect their literature level?
Yes, definitely. It can develop. It can affect their academic performance, especially if ever they're doing it in schools as well. So we have to create an environment where learners are able to have access to these materials, whether it be through the community library, or even just taking the books from school and home. But if ever they are growing up in an environment where they are not motivated to read, they are not motivated to take out a book or even have those materials at home, we know that, you know, in your low socioeconomic backgrounds or socioeconomic areas, you know, learners don't have access to that, and it may become a bit difficult. Books are expensive, you know, so we have to, you know, play a role as people in society as well, whether it be through donating, you know, these books to schools, or donating these books to the libraries, you know, so that the learners actually, you know, and it starts also in the classroom as well. If ever you see that the learner doesn't have access to these materials, or doesn't have that motivation to read, then we have to, you know, create that in supportive environment in schools, and in turn the learners can actually take that and take that into their communities, and and develop themselves, whether it be in their home language or any form of literature, or even just motivating the learners to write their own poetry, to write their own short stories, publishing this work for them, and we have access to internet now, so it is a bit easier, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, so when we look at agencies, do you think that can play a huge role to learners to learn more literature, especially languages? Because in South Africa we have different languages, right? So do you think a learner that is more advanced on languages is more advantageous than a one that is not exposed to a lot of languages?
No, I mean, like, you can be exposed to many languages, but if ever you don't have that drive, or you can speak very proficiently, you can speak 11 languages proficiently, but when we speak about reading comprehension, decoding texts, as well as reading for meaning, expressing yourselves through what you've read, interpreting what you've read, that is a skill that's still yet to be developed. So even if you have a home language and you're extremely good in your home language, whether it be isiZulu, Afrikaans, or Sesotho, you can speak it very well, you can understand it very well, but then when it comes to reading material, you don't understand the underlying messages within that. Those are the types of support that we need to provide for the learners, and we cannot develop those skills if ever we don't have the reading material in the classroom, or we don't give the learners access to this reading material. So it could be either or. So a learner that has limited proficiency in a language would be able to decode or read for meaning or understand the text that they are reading. And then you get one that is extremely proficient in the language, but they are unable to comprehend the underlying messages. So that is something that we develop as teachers. That is something that we assist the learners with, and also accepting the interpretations. So not saying that there's one way of looking at things, but just accepting their contributions in the classroom, accepting the way they see things, and also just developing their comprehension and understanding through continuous questioning. So, yeah.
So when we look at the structuralism, for example, let's say this class is more like, let me say, it is structured in a way of, it has literacy, or let me say a literature that is exposed on the wall. So how can, because we know that we have different learners that are visual learners, learners that are listeners. So how can we combine those learners to be in the same track? The visual ones, and also the ones that prefer to just listen to music, and then that's how they learn. Because there are learners that learn through seeing, there are learners that learn through listening. So how can we make sure that, okay, these learners are also, let me say, they're all accommodated in one class?
I mean, incorporating different teaching styles in your teaching. You can't just teach in one way. You always have to take into consideration the learner's lived experience, number one, and the learner's learning style. So even if you are taught that you need to teach this certain way, you always have to take into context the cultural dynamics in the classroom and the context in which learners learn. So you'll find that this year you are teaching learners that prefer to read. In the following year you get a different group of learners, and they are not as stimulated through reading, but maybe through interaction, through reading plays or reading novels, through dramatization, or allowing them to enact certain scenes or certain plays or certain parts of the novel, or allowing them to write their own stories, in response to whatever they have read. So it's just about, we can't really put, a blanket statement around that or say it's cast on stone. You have to always take into consideration, get to know your learners first. That is very important. Getting to know your learners, getting to understand how they learn, and then you take it from there as a teacher and say, okay, this is what I need to incorporate in my teaching this year. These are the methods that I'm going to use. I'm going to use maybe the videos, in also, like videos alongside, reading the books, because we cannot take that away from them.
So when we look at the academic dynamics, it is broad. So what I want to ask is then, are we allowed as teachers to say, okay, if I see this child, am I able to diagnose that child, or there are specific people that have qualifications that are able to diagnose the child? If I see that this child has this specific learning style, am I able to say, okay, maybe this child is a special child, right? I can see that this child is not in the right class, is supposed to go to the special school. Am I allowed to diagnose that learner, or there are specific people that are mostly qualified to do this to do such?
Okay, so you as a teacher, you observe.
Yes.
You observe. You don't diagnose the problem. You observe the problem. You say, okay, this child could have a different learning style, or could have different learning needs, or could have limited abilities when it comes to certain things. And then each school must have an occupational therapist on site, or a psychologist, educational psychologist on site. So then, obviously, in line with the parents, you speak to the parents first as well. You say, look, but I mean, obviously, in order for you to diagnose a problem, first speak to the professional on site, whether it be the occupational therapist or educational psychologist, and say, look, I have a learner that's presenting with these symptoms, or presenting with these learning, difficulties. Can you please just come observe before we speak to the parents? And then if ever the professional obviously says, okay, it could be that this learner needs this, or special interventions. And then obviously you bring the parents, and then you speak to the principal, and then you take it from there. Some parents will say, no, my child is fine just here. I don't want to take them to a special needs school. So you as a teacher need to really find innovative ways to accommodate that child in the class.
Sure. So meaning if the parents say no, you are stuck with that child.
Yes.
Phew.
And you have to find innovative ways. You have to find ways to accommodate that child, because the parent can't say no. The parent can say, look, my child is fine. My child doesn't have any special needs, or I don't want my child to go to a special needs school, or I don't want my child staying in grade 3 or grade 4. I want them to progress to the next grade. So yeah, you need to take that into consideration and find ways to make sure that child is also learning in your classroom.
Yeah. So since we have those let me say learners working where I say if they are given maybe a case study, right, they can read a case study, and but their problem is that they cannot respond to the case study. They can read a case study but they not understand the case study. So how do we make sure that we scaffold such learners so that they can be able to read and understand?
I think that's one thing I always say in my teaching as well, that we cannot really have one approach to that. I cannot say to you that, okay, it's not textbook. Whatever happens in the classroom, it may seem like that when we are teaching, when we are, giving advice and giving tips and whatever, and then you get to the classroom and it's a completely different story. You see that, oh, no, what I learned in my undergrad years may seem irrelevant, so, and then you have to, so always take into consideration the context in which you are teaching. So, because even if the textbook says that you need to use this scaffolding approach, that scaffolding approach may not work for that specific learner. So, it's just about, a trial and error in your classroom, finding different ways. So if ever using sentence starters doesn't work, for a specific child when it comes to reading comprehension, or, understanding, or maybe expressing themselves, you need to find a different way. Maybe use a song in your classroom and ask them to write their own song, whatever the case may be, or ask them to write their own poem. So I usually don't like giving a one approach to that, because there are many and different approaches, and you as a teacher, you have to first assess what is happening in your classroom, and then obviously then can you say, okay, I see that this method worked for this learner, and you'll find that two learners with the exact same problem, and you try one approach to assist those both learners, and you'll find that the approach only works for the one learner and doesn't work for the other learner.
Meaning you need to come with another approach.
So you need to find another approach for the one learner. So the approaches won't work for all learners, even if they are presenting with the exact same problem. So it's just about being very innovative and developing yourself. That's why I say learning is lifelong. Learning from different channels, whatever it may be, reading and developing yourself and seeing, okay, I see that this didn't work, so let me try this method now.
So do you think our educational system is mainly focused, or let me say, is mainly based on the literature? Do you think literature is like more importance on our educational system?
We are not functioning without, even what we're doing now is a form of literature. So even if it's not, writing down or written down, that is a form of literature because we are expressing ourselves, and literature is just an expression from thought to paper, So we as a society will never ever function without literature. So it can be any form of literature. It can be through songs, poems, daily conversations. That is a form of literature. So the foundation of any schooling system is literature. We get to understand everything and everything that happens in the classroom through literature. So I would say our society is built on literature. That poster that you see when you're walking outside is a form of literature.
So do you think you as academic scholars, right, do you get that support that you must get as someone that is an academic scholar? Do you think you have that opportunities as someone who's in the field of research and all these things?
What form of opportunities?
Let me say, maybe working with other scholars from abroad, other universities, etc. Do you think you are at that field, or let me say, do you have those opportunities where others, other lecturers or other doctors reach out to say, let's work on this research?
Definitely. Even last week now, I was talking with some of the lecturers who are teaching both in the foundation phase and senior phase at CPUT and Stellenbosch. So we really do get that community engagement and getting to understand, even through conferences as well. But you as a scholar also need to put yourself out there. You cannot just hide in your shell, You need to build your network, and you get to understand how others are doing things, and you can also incorporate their methods in your own teaching. So that is a very important aspect we as scholars have to have, especially when it comes to, let's say, promotions or whatever. You have to have that community engagement. You have to have that network, whether it be international or local. So
since now you have a PhD, so meaning the next step is you being a professor.
Yeah, that's a long journey. That is a long journey. That takes, like I say, there are various aspects that I would have to first work on. That is publishing, community engagement, international engagements, attending conferences, my teaching, developing my teaching and learning, leadership, So that is maybe in the next 5 to 10 years. But it really depends. I mean, it takes others very long, So publishing one article takes about a year or 2 years. Some people think it's just easy because after writing that article, you can write that article within 1 day, but that has to go to the editors and reviewers and before it even gets put on Google. So it's quite a journey.
Here in UWC, do you have your own, let me say, website where you publish your own researches, or?
No, you have to. You always have to publish in like an accredited journals. Otherwise, then it seems as if So it has to be peer reviewed, or it has to be accredited journals by the Department of Higher Education. So you can, if ever you look at some websites where you can just publish without any peer review or whatever. But it counts more if ever you publish in a accredited journal.
But what confuses me is like, I can't differentiate a book and a book and an article. Is there a difference between a book and an article?
Well, an article is usually 15 pages, so it's a very condensed, very. If ever you want to understand more on the subject, I would say reach out for the book, But if ever you just want to get a basic understanding of, then read the journal article. So usually the journal articles will sometimes use the books to develop their arguments or whatever. But if you want to really understand the subject deeper, reach out for the book, because the article is only about 20 pages. Where the book would be 300 to 400 pages,
in terms of referencing, you know this part, yo. In terms of referencing, like, why is it a must that we all know, like, we need to always reference, even if like I write an assignment using my own mind and everything, but I need to reference that.
Well, to substantiate your arguments, to give weight to your arguments. I mean, even in our daily interactions, even if just talking about soccer or football or rugby, our favorite sport, or our favorite car, we'll be like, hey, BMW is the best. And what is our first instinct? We go on Google. We say, look, this person also said this, and that somehow gives weight to your argument, So it works the same way in academia. Yes, you can say that, you believe that the child learns best through interaction. It's best to find someone else who has done the research, who has gone out in schools, who has really spent time with that subject to substantiate and give weight to your argument. So it's just a matter of credibility, and also just saying, okay, I hear your point, and many other people have said the exact same thing.
So right now, what I want to understand is your own skills, personal skills, right? Because I've noticed that you are also into vlogging. You're also, I must say, I wouldn't say a content creator. Is it a content creator?
No, it's just personal.
Personal, okay.
Enjoyment.
That's like some sort of hobby that you do, like personal time. So how do you manage like time management on you now? You're a lecture, and at time you also do content, vlogging, editing, because that takes time. So how do you get to spend time doing such?
Well, if I'm not at work, if I'm not at church, if I'm not out and about, I'm not going to sit at home and look at the dry walls or look at the paint dry. So I used to love cooking. When I was an undergrad student, even when I was an honors and master's student, I used to love cooking, trying out new recipes. I love doing that, and just saying, okay, I want to try this. Like recently I tried blueberry scones. So it was like, okay, so why not document this? So that is the reason why I wouldn't put it as content creation. It's just personal enjoyment and having hobbies. It's the same as someone going out to soccer practice or going to go play netball. So for me, I love setting up my camera and my tripod. And it's something, like I said in the beginning, that I love working with technology and trying out new things and using different software. So it really gives me great joy. It takes a lot of time, but when I see that I have nothing else to do, I don't like rotting away in bed. So that 3 hours I'd rather spend creating a vlog or
But that the content that you do, you cooking and doing such is like, it's a content that's abroad and people love such content. So what's going to happen, like if it happens that now your content start booming, going viral, now people are logged in your channel. So do you think you can spend more time on that, or you're just
no? It's a passion, and I don't think sometimes I don't think passion should be monotonized, if I can say that. Sometimes you're just doing something for the love of it, for the joy of it, It's like also helping someone else. You don't do it because you want to gain something out of it, but sometimes you just want to help. So for me, I don't think it would get to that scale because it's not something I do on a regular basis. I'll probably do it like once a month or twice a month, So it's something I do when I see that, okay, I have time to spare. Let me do this. Let me try something new today. So I don't think I wouldn't allow it to get to that level because my first love is education. But if someone reaches out to me, like I've had instances where people reach out to me on social media and say, hey, I see that you completed your PhD. Please help me in finding academic articles, or please help me in developing a reference list. And I say, okay, here's my email address. Let's set up a Google Meet. That is my passion. That is my first love. So
So since now you are saying you are now taking a break, you're no longer studying. So are you planning some vacation just to let me say reward yourself to say, yes, I've done it.
Where's the Benjamins first? Where's the Benjamin? Where's the Mula?
Oh.
That requires money, you know. So I would love to. This year, I would love to go on an international trip.
Yes.
But yeah, I think the last time I took an international trip was in 2020, before lockdown. So I would love to do that. I would really love to do that. But yeah, money talks.
Yeah, it does. But you can't just let me say, just tour around South Africa. I don't think it's that expensive.
I would rather take an international trip. You know, I'd rather take an international because it's the same price. It comes up to the same price. So I would rather take an international trip. But I mean, locally, I have family across South Africa, Durban, KZN, Free State. So I visit there, but it doesn't really feel like a vacation. It's just getting out of my personal space. But yeah.
You just want to be abroad.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that.
Okay. Yeah, I think. Yeah, so people that I can say they are watching this show and they want to know more about you. How can they get hold of you? Maybe your social platforms, emails, something like that.
Well, I'm not on Instagram. My Facebook is private, but on TikTok I am Bloom_512. That's BLOOM _512. So yeah.
Okay, guys, I'm sure you heard that. This is us now, the Weekly Dose, signing out. We are hoping to see you soon.
Nikiwe Nondabula will now be introduced to you by Professor Sivasubramaniam. The title of Nikki Nondabula's thesis is An Investigation of Grade 12 English Home Language Learners' Reading of Shakespeare's Plays for Writing Development. The thesis attests to the pedagogical serviceability of Shakespearean plays in the development of grade 12 English home language students' writing skills. Predicated on the social cognitive learning theory and the century-old notion of language through literature, it investigates how the students' thinking, understanding, and their writing development are shaped by their environmental conditions. The interpretive stance of the thesis views students' writing in response to reading Shakespearean plays as a higher order effective attainment commensurate with the writing literacy at school. Likewise, the thesis affirms how their attainment can shield them from the perils of skim reading in an era marked by a rampant inability to read the world and write about it. Vice Chancellor, I request you to confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy on our staff member Nikiwe Nondabula.